today's World Insight with Tian Wei, the theme for the upcoming World Economic Forum is Globalization 4.0. We unpack this daunting terminology. And I speak to tech visionary Kai-Fu Lee. He's helping us to understand whether the world is on the verge of an AI arms
0
race.
to 100. 0 being not intelligent at all, 100 being true human intelligence, we're maybe at a 15.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you on CGTN from Beijing. We begin our show with Davos in Switzerland. The World Economic Forum is just around the corner. This year's theme, Globalization 4.0, shaping a global architecture in the age of the fourth industrial revolution. So what does that mean, and how is this topic relevant for all of us in a world in transition? Take a look.
Around 3,000 leaders and bright minds gather in the Swiss town of Davos for a 5-day meeting. Their mission? Prepare the world for Globalization 4.0, a term that coincides with the fourth industrial revolution. As 4.0 means breakthrough technologies such as 5G and artificial intelligence, it will bring both opportunities and challenges. As the current ways of living get disrupted, can global mechanisms keep up? According to the forum's organizers, this year's summit will look at how to make the exiting global order more moral.
Globalization produced winners and losers, but now we have to look after the losers, after those who have been left behind.
The 2019 World Economic Forum is taking place at a time when multilateralism is under threat and populism is on the rise. Among the around 60 heads of states who will be at the forum are German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan will lead the Chinese delegation. But it is the absence of other leaders that has attracted attention. U.S. President Donald Trump backed out due to the U.S. federal shutdown. British Prime Minister Theresa May is tangled up in the Brexit chaos. And French President Emmanuel Macron has just spent the 10th weekend dealing with yellow vest protests. As the global economy slows down and frustrations grow around the world, can Davos help find a solution in time?
For more on the World Economic Forum, we are joined in Beijing with Zhang Gong, professor from the University of International Business and Economics. Also in Beijing, we have Einar Tangen, a current affairs commentator. In London, we have Professor Ian Begg from the European Institute. He's also the co-director of the Darendorf Forum of the London School of Economics and Political Science. Gentlemen, I want to welcome to the three of you. World Economic Forum this time. Very dramatic, I have to say, Professor Begg. You see delegations are coming and then delegations canceling and then they come again and then the key members not going. It is still confusing right now. But Professor, it seems there's a lot of countries that they have to really take care of so-called domestic affairs.
Yes, very much so. We have the continuing shutdown in the US, which is becoming a ridiculous piece of theatre with both sides unwilling to back down. We have the saga of Brexit in the UK, which is obliging Theresa May to cancel her trip to Davos because she is obliged to make a statement before the House of Commons on Monday evening and then try to engineer things for a further vote towards the end of January. And we have various business leaders thinking, well, if the free world's leader is not there, maybe I shouldn't be going either. So it's disappointing for Davos because Davos is always an opportunity to do deals behind the scenes which reduce global tensions.
Yes, indeed. And we also heard President Macron coming from France, not apparently going this time because of the so-called yellow vest issue back at home. For you, Mr. Tangen, all of what these leaders are facing today are results of development globally, not just for themselves. But we are seeing they're too busy tending their so-called domestic affairs issues and forget about the opportunity to communicate, even though difficult, but communication really have to go with the root cause of these issues.
Yeah, well, communication and also some trends, some very important ones regarding the middle class.
Right.
Despite taking 2/3 of the world's profits home over the last 20 years, the middle class has actually shrunk in both Europe and the United States, and you're seeing a lot of dissatisfaction, which is driving this populism. So this was an opportunity for communication. Unfortunately, has become a testament to the fact that the United States is not interested in a multipolar world.
That's not news, I guess, not news for quite a couple of years already. But there are still a lot that are going. Mm-hmm. Some of the other countries in the developed world and a huge number of developing and emerging economies, it seems that the latter is having bigger desire to communicate and about searching for solutions for a very entangled situation right now, Professor.
Well, I mean, the Davos is all about globalization. I mean, the crowd there, the leaders, the messages delivered, these venues are all about globalization. And as we all know, this is a place that Donald Trump isn't enamored with in the first place. And with the fact that he's not going, some other leaders are not going as well. But if you look at the emerging market economies, look at the developing countries, for the last 20-some years or so, they have been mostly the beneficiaries of globalization. And certainly this is a venue they would like to continue to keep their voice heard by the world, and also advocated their messages that we should continue this course of globalization. Granted, there are some problems. There are the shrinking middle class in developed countries, and there are shortcomings of this current business model. But at least this has made a lot of people lifted from poverty in many developing countries. So this is the place they still want to have their voice heard.
Certainly, this is the place that they want to have their voice heard. But on the other hand, Professor Begg, is it fair that the developed economies, at least some of them, are arguing they are not benefiting from the latest round of globalization, even though in the globalized world, it's very hard to tell as to how much one country benefits vis-a-vis the other country benefits. The reason why it is so clear that developing countries are benefiting from it is because of the low base where the developing countries were starting from. Anyway.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that globalization is something that has raised the overall level of prosperity, but doesn't necessarily reach all parts. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that we're talking about the middle class is that certain middle classes may feel that they've had a relatively raw deal from globalization recently. I think, though, that we need to put timescales on this. If you put this in timescales of a year or two, then things fluctuate. But over a 10 or 20 year period, the advances that have been wrought by globalization are still very significant. But still, we have to be aware that within that there are winners and losers. And a very simple proposition that I think we've discussed before is that it's the losers who make the most noise and make the most objections to what's going on. The winners tend to keep quiet.
That's certainly true. On the other hand, we're going to see some important communications as well. This time, Mr. Tangen, the Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan is leading a Chinese delegation over there. Vice ministers coming from various Chinese government organizations are going to be there, and they're going to participate in the open discussion over there, be able to speak on the record in such a big platform and by so many numbers of Chinese ministerial level officials. It's quite a rare thing, one has to say.
Well, what's really important about it is that the other player has left the field. Donald Trump will not be sending anybody. That means that in his absence, he's created a vacuum. And this fully expect China to not take advantage of it, but they'll be the player that everyone's listening to. They're the only one who is saying consistently that they're dedicated to a global multipolar world of trade. And so you're going to hear a lot of it. But I don't know if this forum is going to last, given the fact that there are other things. You have Belt and Road, you have China's new comprehensive economic partnership. These types of things seem to be taking more, and they seem to be more regional. The fact that WEF has failed to solve a lot of problems, despite a lot of very nice things happening in the early 90s,
Right.
especially with Israel and the Palestinians, and also with South Africa. It just hasn't made much traction lately.
World Economic Forum, as far as I understand, has never been a place where you got out the policies, because that's mainly a platform for people to talk
Right.
in the conference rooms, in the meeting rooms, in the hall corner.
Right.
That's a place where you do the real negotiation and the discussion away from the official spotlight.
Right.
It is not necessarily a talk shop either, but its goal is really just to communicate.
Right.
So Professor Gong, on the other hand, when these so-called leaders from some of the most developed economies are absent, we do see concerns of the global economy. If you look at the headlines these days around the world about the global economy,
Right.
that is the worry about recessions.
Right. Absolutely.
Even though, Professor, before you speak, the economies, if you look at it, is not doing that bad, whether in the United States particularly and elsewhere in the world, but the geopolitical fight that is going on right now have a lot of people worried.
If you're talking about the Davos being a platform to solve economic problems, if you look at from that perspective, this year's Davos might be a little bit earlier because the bad time hasn't really arrived yet. Although there have been alarms and predictions
Well, you
about.
don't want the bad situation to happen before you are trying to do something
Right,
about it, right?
right. So World Bank has been predicting, the bad times around the corner, prepare for this. But at least right now we're still doing okay. We're just seeing a little bit signs of weakness, but not in a catastrophe
So
yet,
you're
not in a whole
not worried
recession.
about
yet.
recession, is
So
that what you're saying?
yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. We're not into recession yet. So there's no urgent need to talk about solving the global economic recession jointly right now. So this kind of a discussion is still absent on this year's Davos forum. So I think that's why we don't have a lot of attendance from.
If you look at
important-
2008, Professor Begg, many say the reason why we managed to be able to overcome it within quite some time has a lot to do with the fact that at that time, people and countries, economies of different types still work together. China, of course, at that time as an emerging economy played a pivotal role. At the same time, even though the United States was suffering from the economic problems. But now, with the distrust and the trend of geopolitical struggles, many wonder if something happening to our economy, God bless us, not anything serious happening to our economy, but if there were anything, the kind of coordination and cooperation relevant then may not be available now.
Well, I think it's important to stress what Professor Gong said, which is that we're not heading towards a recession. The sort of recession we saw more than a decade ago is the exception. It only occurs once in every few decades, whereas cyclical downturns of the sort that seem to be arising now, because maybe of the credit overhang, maybe because there's a gradual tightening of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, they are much more routine, and we don't need emergency measures to solve them. Therefore, although we can say that it's regrettable that some of the leaders aren't around in Davos, and also that behind that there are significant political risks, I don't think in the absence of political risk there is that much of an economic risk that things are going to go sour. So I'd be relatively optimistic on the economic front and say all the downside risks are political, and there we have to deal with that particular wild card in the White House.
But Mr. Begg, I mean, we could have an optimistic note, and that is crucial. On the other hand, if you look at the ups and downs of the global market, of course, you could say the market, the nature of it is to be volatile. But if you look at it over just the past few months, enormous amount of companies are losing money, investors are losing money, and the sentiment is going down, and pessimism in the air. That is just an undeniable fact, no matter what the real status of the world economy is. So this is a very interesting phenomenon, isn't it, Mr. Begg?
Well, No, I disagree with you there. I think
Okay.
that we're seeing a relatively normal slowdown, which is the part of the economic cycles of modern capitalism, rather than the much more acute recession that we saw in 2007, 2008, 2009. And I would be less alarmed about the ability to weather this and see things rebounding quite rapidly after a comparative slowdown. There's a big difference between a slowdown and a recession.
Right, there is a big difference. On the other hand, Mr. Tangen, where is the growing trend and what is the growing engine that our world economy could see?
Well, that's my point. I'm going to have to disagree with my colleagues and agree with you on this one. Out-of-date metrics, the fact that today most of the value in the stock markets are based on intangible values. We see companies losing, tens of billions of dollars over the course of a very short period of time. These are linked to loans. There's an overhang, as the professor said, of corporate debt in the United States and elsewhere. These could be triggers that could really impact banks. You could see a real pullback. I would like to have this conversation in about 12 to 14 months. I don't think that using classical economics in the absence of metrics that no longer are applicable is the way to be looking at the current economies.
On the other hand, China and the United States, Professor Gong, are having the trade discussions.
Right.
And there is an apparent deadline, so-called March the 1st. And we do not know whether things are going to be partially resolved before that. Therefore, things can get back to track somewhat at least. But the relationship between China and the United States are already evolving, like it or not. It is more toward competition, some say, and probably even rivalry.
Right.
So this is a thing that is happening right now. So as a result of that, all the discussions taking place at Davos is overshadowed by a fact that one of the two largest economies in the world are possibly heading for something that nobody could predict. That is a long-term thing.
My hope is that U.S. and China will be engaged in a healthy competition, peaceful, healthy competition. There's no doubt, as you said, the relationship is going to be a competitive nature. The U.S. side is concerned about the rising of corporate China, China's technological ascendance, and all these things will sooner or later challenge the U.S. supremacy in a range of aspects, even maybe in defense areas. But as long as we have this relationship in a managed and containing a competitive nature, it's a peaceful, healthy, competitive nature, I think it's okay. My optimism lies in the fact that I think at a very fundamental level, U.S. and China as an ocean apart, the geopolitical conflicts, if any, I think would be very minor, not going to be really cutting into sort of the.
I'm going to disagree with you, John. I mean, right now we have the U.S. Congress on a bipartisan basis saying that no company can go and sell to Huawei and ZTE because they're threats to the United States.
It's still not being enacted into law yet.
Not yet, but you have similar moves in Germany and all these allies. We saw the 12 countries stand behind the U.S. condemning Huawei and saying they're not going to use it for any kind of strategic purposes. This is not a healthy competition when you try to shoot.
The purpose of our discussion is not about the U.S.-China relations, but rather how the evolving U.S.-China relations have to make others rethink or think again about their strategies, whether they are dealing with globalization,
TPP and RCEP,
or yes, these are platforms, or they are dealing with their overall international approach. Professor Beck, your thought?
Well, my thoughts on this, and I have good friends at Huawei who I think are doing very admirable work in developing technologies. It's worth saying that sort of thing, because what we're on the cusp of is a series of new technological developments. We have artificial intelligence on one side, we have a whole lot of activity coming on biosciences, and this is transformative. Some are even describing it as a fourth industrial revolution. So we have to think about how that's going to bear on the future of the world economy. It's disruptive, but disruption, all the economic history in this is pretty revealing. The disruption tends to lead to new forms of activity. And yet we always look at it through the lens of old activity and think, oh, things are going badly, when in fact new things are coming on stream which are going to be very helpful both socially and economically. I think that's a good reason for optimism. And here, maybe unusually, I'm agreeing with Professor Gong on this, that there is good stuff in the pipeline.
No, regarding, I know the point you make, if you look at the relation between US and UK in the past, for example, all these things the US currently is trying right now have been all tried by UK before, okay? They try to cut off technology, transfer of textiles from UK to Lancaster, UK to United States. The United States tried different ways, try to get the technology. All these things have been tried. But eventually, United States and UK didn't get into war, right? I mean, after a period of time, things worked out, and eventually, UK considered that, okay, United States is going to rise. So hopefully, this kind of a path that that we've seen in history is going to repeat again.
But hope is not a strategy. Hope is a wish. Hope is not a strategy. The strategy is important. That's why WEF is important, because people can talk about strategy, but will they be able to figure out strategy? That's another thing, isn't it, Professor Beck? Briefly.
Well, yes, we can talk about strategizing at political level, but don't forget there's a dynamic behind all this in the way economies evolve, and that's the important thing I think we need to focus on. I reiterate what I said earlier. There are big political risks through some of the things that are going on, but they are, to me, the main thing that we need to be talking about, whether at Davos or anywhere else. And in the absence of some of the big players, unfortunately, Davos is not going to be the forum in which these things are resolved. But we need to persevere with the dialogue, with the attempts to tone down the political conflicts, because they are the biggest risk to the global economy.
Finally, before we go, Mr. Tangen, I was earlier talking to the chief rep of the World Economic Forum to China. He was suggesting, David Aikman, talking about what China needs to do at the World Economic Forum is to clearly tell the others in clear terms what China's intentions and goals are, so that the communication can be done, the communication that is needed. At least that would contribute to the finding of solutions that we're seeing today. Before we go, Mr. Tangen, your thought about how can that be evolving? How can we open that communication?
Well, what people will be looking and responding very positively is if China says we have a new package of opening up, here's a new schedule, here's how we intend to do that. This will be a very marked change from the absence of the United States, and hopefully a very positive sign for everybody who's attending. I do believe that TPP and RCEP are the future. You have an embattled WTO that's being threatened by U.S. non-action. Brexit, all of the other problems out there, I think it's going to become more regional.
One thing is for sure, there's a lot food for thoughts, at least for this year's World Economic Forum. Enormous amount of content to be discussed, probably even beyond the time frame they could afford. But for now, thank you so much, the three of you, for being with us. Zhang Gong, Einar Tangen, Ian Beck, thank you, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program, I speak to tech visionary Kai-Fu Lee. We reveal if we are on the verge of an AI arms race. Right after.
In this episode of Travelogue, I hike up volcanoes in search of ancient temples and find one clinging to a cliff like you would not believe. Join me in this third and final episode of our exciting daunting series for an adrenaline-pumping adventure.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Innovation is also expected to be top on the agenda at the 2019 World Economic Forum, as it did over the past few years. It's the most important strength of any economy, one could argue, and an area of competition between countries such as China and the United States, some believe. Despite the hype over artificial intelligence, machines still can't think like the humans. In the last few years, they have become capable of learning. Our devices have opened their eyes and ears, and cars have taken the wheel. Today, humanity is accelerating into a future that few can predict. That's why so many people are desperate to meet Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, who has made public his ties to AI with his book, AI Superpowers. Well known as a venture capitalist and a technology executive, Dr. Kai-Fu Lee started his exploration with artificial intelligence decades ago as a PhD student when he developed the world's first speaker-independent continuous speech recognition system. So, is the future of AI, artificial intelligence, as tempting as we have been told? On the eve of the 2019 World Economic Forum, in which Dr. Kai-Fu Lee is to participate, I visited him in Beijing. He showed me the latest ventures at his investment firm Sinovation, and also meet some of the young technique people over there. They could provide answers, as many say, to those questions. Dr. Lee, what a pleasure seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Us. Well, we have all kinds of engineers, actually. We are not just a venture capitalist firm, but we have people look at this project here.
Yes.
They're simulating a factory assembly line and using AI to do visual inspection.
These days, you are investing in billion-dollar companies that are AI companies.
Right.
Even $10 billion companies that are AI companies.
Yeah.
So how big will they become eventually?
Well, when we invested in them, they were 10 to 50 million. So if they're 1 to 10 billion now, we've already made 100 times. So if they get 10 times bigger, we'll make 1,000 times. If they don't, we'll settle for 100.
Is there overhyped about AI these days, the concept itself?
Not the ones we've invested in, because
I know you would say so.
We are very selective about the quality of AI, the quality of the people, and also the solving real business problems.
Why don't we sit down somewhere in your company and then we talk about exactly what it means, AI superpower, as you recently illustrated. Going to Davos.
Yes.
A lot of things about AI to be discussed. First of all, are you having a utopian view of the future of AI or exactly the opposite?
Exactly in the middle. Neither utopian nor dystopian. Yeah, well, the utopians think everything will be perfect. They're either too optimistic or they have business motives to do that. The dystopians are imagining AI is much more powerful than it actually is. AI is a very pragmatic technology that is just a tool to help us within one given domain to do things better. So it's a tool. It's not going to be bring utopia or dystopia.
But what is giving you the confidence that we might be able to consciously take the golden middle way?
I think we have to be rational. I think people who are talking about utopian vision, like AI is totally for symbiotic and helps everybody, no jobs will be lost. I think they're either very naive or saying so because they don't want any negative PR for their company. Over time, they'll be proven wrong. And then people arguing AI will be so powerful, they'll wash our minds and change us and also maybe even control us. They just watch too much science fiction. So I'm not sure we'll be exactly in the middle, but I think we can get rid of these two obviously and ridiculously wrong ways of thinking.
But there has been some overexcitement if you look at the market these days, whether it is companies coming out and suggesting AI technologies or even authors like you wrote a book, AI Superpower.
Well, AI is a proven, realistic tool that will, in almost every industry and domain, bring about greater profit, efficiency, lower costs, and potentially disrupting some industries. It's very similar to electricity. So if you want to think about that as revolutionary, absolutely. But revolutionary doesn't mean utopian.
But I remember you said that even in the 60-minute interview that it's even going to be more powerful than electricity.
Certainly. I think if anything, it's going to be faster. Think how much progress we've made in just the last 2 years. And think about all the most successful and valuable companies in the world. They're largely enhanced by AI. The Amazon, Facebook, Google, Tencent, Alibaba, a lot of them are basically built on all of them are based on building on large data, and that large data turns into a gold mine by monetizing with AI. So we're already just a few years into the AlphaGo victory over Lee Sedol. We're now seeing the world's many of the world's most valuable 10 or 20 companies being powered by AI. So I think that is demonstrating the value of AI. There is maybe some bubble in other companies, as you suggest. Because, you know, whenever a big wave comes, everybody redeclares themselves or redefines themselves.
Exactly.
Like 2 years ago, 3 years ago,
they just use a name tag on their forehead.
Yeah, everybody was an O2O company. Before that, everybody was a social gaming company, and before that,
and now everybody claims themselves to be an AI company.
Well, then those companies will have to die.
But you know, one of the things, Dr. Li, you have to explain to our audience worldwide very clearly what exactly is AI, because that definition even is debatable.
Right. Well, we think of AI as a very large branch of understanding human intelligence, machine intelligence, and that's a big field. But largely when we talk about AI, we really mean machine learning or even deep learning. And what that means is a big black box which within one domain, when you present a lot of data, it can learn to optimize some objective function.
And it can learn on its own.
Learn on its own. So you present a lot of data and say, these are pictures of Larry, these are pictures of John, and it learns to discriminate them. So this is extensible to things that relate to accumulated data, internet data, data of perception, speech and vision, and also movement. So essentially it is improving one level at a time, a lot of human capabilities, but they're limited in one domain. You can't teach a face recognizer to instantly become capable of making loans in banks. So unlike people whose thinking is integrated across all domains and knowledge persists, in the AI, it's really just one tool for giving out bank loans, one tool for recognizing faces.
Task-oriented.
Exactly.
But when is it? How far are we from the so-called integrated way of thinking, just like human being?
Today's AI, as much as it can become like electricity, doesn't become human intelligence. If we think of, let's say, 0 to 100, 0 being not intelligent at all, 100 being true human intelligence, we're maybe at a 15. So we have a huge gap to go. We've made a big breakthrough called deep learning, maybe a few smaller innovations, but we are maybe 10 more breakthroughs to go. And it took us 63 years to make that one breakthrough. And I think we'd be very presumptuous and naive to think we can predict in 10 or 20 years the next 10 breakthroughs would be solved. Nobody knows the answer, and anyone who claims they know the answer or can make an accurate prediction are really just fooling you or selling a book.
If you talk about AI these days, a lot of people are thinking about competition, particularly beyond the national borders. For example, China and the United States. If you think about AI development in the US, some have been giving the fact that probably 70% of the global AI research and also business models are being developed in the United States. In China, maybe 30 to 40% or less than that. So will that be a new so-called battleground, even for geopolitics, when it comes to innovation?
I think the reality is that US is ahead in basic research, but China is actually about equal in its ability to build valuable businesses, monetize them, and create value out of them.
Based on the size of the market, of course.
Based on the size of the market,
and
which
the data.
Also the amount of data, and also the tenacity of the entrepreneurs, a lot of smart money being poured in and given to the right people who work incredibly hard and iterate on that data. And also the government is very supportive in building infrastructure. So these, I think, actually gives advantage to China in terms of execution and monetization. So the question of the competition boils down to how much value is basic research, because China's momentum is faster. Assuming no basic research breakthroughs, China may surpass the US in 3 to 5 years timeframe. So the likelihood of basic research breakthrough is very hard to estimate.
That's right.
I think it's a little bit difficult for any country, US included, to count on that breakthrough to carry US's current leadership position in AI.
So what are you trying to say here? You're trying to read between the lines. There needs to be some kinds of cooperation between China and the United States.
Well, in an ideal world...
Is that the wishful thinking?
In an ideal world, which is always wishful thinking, US, China, and China would complement each other. Of course, I think the US government is making that possibly difficult in the future with the trade issue, but also the things related to export control. We'll see what kind of ripples that may have, but I think that optimism is a little bit too optimistic and too naive.
Cautious optimistic, I guess, to the most.
I would say I would prudently choose to not bet on any company or business based on a reversal of the current U.S. government approach to be effectively technologically protectionist around AI.
And you are going to have those leaders from around the world, their ears open at the World Economic Forum as a speaker and also as someone who interact with them on a constant basis there. What are some of the crucial messages you think you would like to deliver then?
Well, I'm going to be one of the co-chairs of the AI Council at the World Economic Forum. And I think it's important to bring a Chinese voice into that collective thinking. There have been many global institutions looking at AI, but China has largely been excluded. So I'd like to see that representation present so that any misunderstanding about China could be explained. Secondly, I'd like to raise the awareness about the inequality issues and about the other challenges AI brings forward, and also find ways that people could share ideas and at the same time, not forcing everyone to exactly the same culture and value system, because different backgrounds will create different types of thinking with respect to the balance, for example, between privacy and security. Certain cultures may value privacy at the utmost importance, others may care more about security. So I think as we create global ways to help protect the users and reduce the inequality, we have to think about it in a way that doesn't force the whole world into the exact same value system, and at the same time finds the lowest common denominator and the process and the idea sharing that can help everyone make progress forward.
You said yourself, Dr. Li, for example, there might be very different sets of rules and regulations. There also might be very different sets of standards. And there might also be very different sets of cultures and things that goes with it, policies as well. So when you have such a divided and diversified realities, are they really going to help, no matter how carefully they're crafted?
Well, in a world that believes in globalism, I think there are possible, even likely good outcomes. In an increasingly nationalistic and protectionist environment, it will be an uphill struggle. Hopefully we can still find a few commonalities, but we can't be too optimistic about a a true consensus among all the countries. And in fact, when we start out, we should realize that such a full consensus simply does not exist.
The World Economic Forum this year is about so-called Globalization 4.0. Of course, that's a phrase they invented. However, to you, as an innovator, as an investor, as someone who believes there needs to be a world that embraces technology and peace at the same time, what exactly does that mean to you?
Well, I think it means a serious sense of global responsibility. For countries that are strong, they should worry about countries that are weak, because the gap of strong and weak will become larger and larger. For companies and countries that possess technology, they should think about how to share that, as opposed to a zero-sum game globally. And I think we, at a time when there are many countries arguing for nationalistic gains at the expense of globalism, I think we need to demonstrate tangible value of globalism in order to win some of the people back.
What is the tangible value of globalism then?
Well, it has to translate to, unfortunately, people who promote nationalism do so by measuring the stock market index, or its domestic unemployment rate, or its own growth at the expense of maybe the global growth. So I think in the short term, they may be able to demonstrate that. But hopefully, we will find a few areas in which greater collaboration can numerically and quantitatively lead to something that benefits all countries. That's a starting point. That's probably the best way to get started.
Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, what a pleasure to see you once again. I'll see you on AI on the Alps.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee.
Thanks.
That is our exclusive interview with Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, well known for his contribution to the world of artificial intelligence. As co-chair of the AI Council of the World Economic Forum, I'm sure he and his colleagues in the small town of Davos will have a lot to discuss this year. Well, that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thank you for watching. And do join me this week as I travel to Davos in Switzerland, where I will bring to you our special program, A World in Change, from the sidelines of the World Economic Forum 2019. Bye for now.